He has spoken on the topics faith, family, and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK, and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer, and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of StoryPowerMasterclass, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television, as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
I remember the first time I was asked, do you know so-and-so? Because they're in the military too. In the military too? Right? Because we have the same haircuts and uniforms, you think we all know each other? All over the world? We're that much alike? Are you serious? And yet there's a drive to that in society today that really, really puzzles me. Why is it we think we can just throw a label on, put somebody in a category and completely erase their distinctness, their uniqueness, their gifts and their talents? And that's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. Stay tuned.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. My son graduates from basic training this week, and I remember going through basic training myself when they basically stripped us of everything that was our own unique identity. They took all of the clothes that we wore to basic training, they shaved our heads down to absolutely nothing. They took away any identifying markers that would make us individually unique people. And then they put us through a process over the next 30 days to 6 weeks to learn specifically how to be a part of a team where every part of the team did exactly what they were told to do. They participated and performed exactly as they were told to. Now, I understand in the purpose of basic training that has to be the case. It's not about social class, it's not about education, it's not about any of those things when you get to basic training. Everybody starts off on the same playing field. Now, it is true that if you come into enlistment with a certain amount of education, you have rank when you come out of basic training. But in basic training, everybody's the same. Your age doesn't matter. Your income last year doesn't matter. It doesn't matter any aspect of who you are when you get to basic training. You're taught to move, think, and act as one unit. Now, if you're already with a college degree, then you may go in a different path, and instead of going to the regular basic training, you go off to OTS and you go as a cadet to the academy. That has its own kind of homogeny creating type of a thing to say, here's how we're exactly alike. It's fascinating to me, though, to see society, culture, and it seems like a really specific bent of society and culture that wants to blur all the lines between male and female, between educated and not educated, between the races, between the ages, between the religious backgrounds, to reach a point where we're all the same. And to me, that presents itself as a drastic problem and an abysmal failure. Yes, it's powerful and it's necessary to find common ground, to find that place where there's rapport, because your likeness to my likeness is so relative. I can see how we have this common ground, this thing we can talk about. We're from the same part of the country. We grew up with the same kind of lifestyle. We have the same kind of families. I listened to some training material, well, it's been almost 15 years ago, from a group called the Global Information Network. And in that training material, I remember them saying, part of the philosophy of the uber wealthy is that they believe that there is a a mindset of the not so uber wealthy that is corrosive and destructive. And because they believe that to be true, if you're not wealthy enough to think like the uber wealthy, then you just wouldn't understand certain things about dating or finances or how to manage your checkbook or where to invest your funds or how to treat other people. And if you don't think those ways, then you're the problem. And so they raise their children to say, we don't want to affiliate with those who have a different mindset. Now, I know what you're thinking right up front. You're thinking, that's not true. There's nobody that does that. But if you've been close enough to that line of demarcation where the conversation is completely obvious, there's no question in your mind that it's true. I remember hearing family members in my family when I was growing up, when a new girlfriend or boyfriend would come around and we'd hear things like, they're just like us. They think like us. And there's a comfort zone in knowing that people have the same thoughts politically, religiously, familially, that there's going to be some common ground. There's going to be some comfort zone going on there. But you can see the line of demarcation come in really simply just in the natural disaster of what happened in the Carolinas in the last month. The idea that we have veterans, former military active duty, whose job it was to muster goods and services and people from one part of the world and take them into another part of the world where there'd been a natural disaster or a war zone where lives had been lost and people were in shock. But to be able to get the logistics of what needs to fly, what equipment do we need to take it, who needs to be on board to make this happen, what do we need to take into them, what do they need first? Is it evacuation? Is it food? Is it water? Is it some way to rebuild their shelter? Is it a better communication structure? What do they need now? And just the ability to triage that moment and identify what's there, that's a very specific skill set. It takes a certain way of thinking. And when you look across the veterans from Vietnam till yesterday, you have veterans who've been trained in so many of those siloed areas. Now to look at a veteran and go, well, he's a veteran, he's got that figured out, or she's a veteran, she's got that figured out. Probably not so much. Why? Because even as military members, even as veterans, we had our own specific jobs. We had our own specific fields of study, the things that we were experts in. I mean, I could study long enough and figure out how to build a bridge, but that's not something I have experience with. I've never actually built a bridge. Not every veteran knows how to build a bridge. I don't know how to fly a Black Hawk helicopter. I know people who do, but I'm not one of them. My job is to get you out of it if it's on fire. That's what I was trained to do as a fire rescue person. As a first responder, even after I got out of the military, my job is to get you out of the burning car. I don't know how to build a car. I can work on my own. But you understand that when we look at job skills and we look at talents and we look at individual abilities, the military is a great macrocosm of this illustration that when we look across the board, we see people trained from all walks of life, trained into a skill set to do a specific job or specific function. Now, they weren't exactly the same kind of people when they came to that function, but they were trained in that function. And now they retain that skill to be able to serve others for a long period of time. On the other hand, we had the bureaucrats who sit in their high seats and they make financial only decisions. And they think, well, we should contact so-and-so because they're the experts in this. And we'll have to send them a check. We'll have to send these people. We'll have to send these people. And the feedback we heard on the ground from the people who were trained to build bridges, evacuate people, deliver food, deliver goods and services, provide transportation, was that they were running into red tape roadblocks. Well, we need to get all the food in one place so we can then figure out how to distribute it. We're like, well, the veterans have already got that figured out. They're on their way. The Cajun Navy, the locals, the people who came in from charitable organizations like Mercury One and Good Samaritan, they kind of had all that thought through in their head before they landed on the ground in the first place. And now they run into a barricade of people who couldn't build a bridge to save their life. but they have a title. They've been washed, if you will, in this homogeny of, I'm the government person, I represent such and such, and I will do it my way, and I don't care what makes good sense. I just know that I have the title. Now, let me just tell you, if you're a leader and you have lost the ability to see the uniqueness and the distinction of the people on your team, if you've lost the ability to see your own uniqueness and distinctions, to find the thing that you were made for, that you were gifted at, that you are the best in the world at, if you've lost sight of that because you're just a cog in the wheel following along with all of the other aspects of making society one, putting it all on one plane, like, let me just be honest with you too. The people who claim that their objective is equity, I can't say this any other way, they're lying through their teeth. What they want is a distinction between the elites and everybody else. What they mean is you'll all be equally broke, equally submissive, equally under the charge of. Equity and equality are not the same thing to start with. But when you make declarations in public that your goal is equity, what you're really saying is we want to redistribute to everybody who's not at our level, take everybody else and kind of, hammer down the high spots and raise up the low spots till everybody's the same, but they're still not going to be at our level. And yes, I've had conversations with people who think, believe, and act that way. They treat their money that way. They treat people around them that way. They have a very distinct look at themselves as better, and everybody else, there's maybe some better and some lower in this other class of people, but they're certainly not on the same level with us. Trust me, they exist, and they have an agenda of their own. And when they declare equity, homogeny, that everything's going to be the same, we're all just alike, we're all in the same playing field, you'll own nothing and you'll like it. There's a reason for that. Little side note. Which do you treat better? The car you rented or the car you bought? The scooter that you picked up on the corner and rode it for 6 blocks because you could just swipe your phone or your Apple Watch and bing, and now you take off with it and you get to the end of the block with it and it's not yours. You don't own that. Who cares? Right? If it gets back in the little gate where it belongs, if it's well taken care of, if you didn't jump off of 3 curbs and bend the frame with it, I mean, it's not yours. Why do you care? Which one do you take better care of? What you own or what you borrow? What you own or what you rent? I would say if you ask that question of 1,000 people, 70 to 80% would say, I take better care of things that are mine. It's mine. I own it. Of course I'm going to take good care of it. Why would I destroy my own stuff? Now, not that they would necessarily intentionally destroy other people's stuff, but it certainly doesn't get the same level of vigilance and diligence in caretaking. Now, think to yourself about this idea that you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Are you going to take care of it? No. When ownership rights go away, so does concern for that property. And I don't care if you're talking about 5 acres of land or an entire nation, or if you're talking about the pencil you borrowed from your neighbor. Oh, sorry, I dropped it and it broke. Sorry. That's about the end of that, right? It's just not the same level of concern if you don't own it. Okay, back to my original point though. The gifts, the talents, the skills that make you uniquely you, everybody on your team has those as well. Now, there may be 20 people that are trained as bridge builders, and some who, when they think of building a bridge, immediately their mind goes into numbers and what's the weight load and what's the capacity and how long does it have to be, and what about the erosion factor of the water that we're crossing over, and what about the bridge abutments? Are there natural rocks somewhere around here? And what about the pathway that we need to get to the bridge and away from the bridge? How much weight will that bear? How much space do we need? All of those things immediately come to mind for them. And for others, they're thinking, well, what's the proper material? What can we build with that we have on hand? Do we have to go get steel? Do we have to wait for a permit? Okay, how do we build this bridge right now? There are people who think like that. It's their natural thought process. It's the way, you ready for this? It's the way they were wired. They have a uniqueness about them that makes them a little different than the average bear, even when they're around nothing but bears. When they're around a team of bridge builders, there are people whose mind immediately goes to weight load, others that goes to material, others that go to entrance and egress. And they think that way on purpose. There are firefighters that I worked with when we rolled up on a scene. The first thing they looked at was, is that vehicle stable? Well, it should be in the mind of everybody. Before you go climbing on that car, ask yourself, is it going to roll over on you before you get the victims out? Is it going to kill you before you can help anybody? That should be in your thought process. That's part of your training. But some people's brain, the way they're wired from their creator, that's where they go first. Others just charge in. And we're like, hold on. Let's make sure we have enough fire suppression systems. We have everything in place. We have the right people. We have the right tools. The vehicle is stable. Now we can rush in. And that seems ridiculous. But I'll tell you, there are people who are wired to think differently. Some people look at a mergers and acquisition, and the first thing they think is, how much money is it going to cost to buy it? And what about the competition? And how many other people are we looking at hiring or letting go of? What about the human cost of buying out this company? If all those people lose their job, what does that do to the community? What does that do to the economy of the local marketplace? And others are just looking at it going, well, how long before profitability? Now, are we buying the company because of its assets and its people and its training? Are we buying it because of its brand? Are we buying it because of its name ID? Or are we buying it because it is our worst competition? If we get rid of them, then our business succeeds. I'm telling you, there are people whose uniqueness in this life thinks differently, even when they're trained in the same job, even when they do exactly the same work. Now, there's something maybe you've come across it or not. It's a great little book called Strength Finders. I've done the Florence Littauer, the colors, the animals, the disc profiles, the list goes on and on of the different ways of assessing and evaluating the people that you're dealing with, the people you're training, and the who that you are. And in my estimation, in my opinion, this little book has had more accuracy and more thoughtful input into identifying the uniqueness of who you are than anything else that I've dealt with. Here's a little quote in the beginning of the book. It's on page 13. Our quote is from Peter Drucker. You may know him as the business guru. He was a business leader forever and ever and ever. He said, most people think they know what they're good at. They are usually wrong. And yet a person can perform only from strength. Now, in this book, it goes on to talk about why they call it a strength versus a talent. But there's a great little mathematical equation, if you want to call it that, on page 20 of the book. It says talent, defined as a natural way of thinking, feeling, or behaving, times multiplied by investment, which is the time spent practicing, developing your skill, and building your knowledge base, equals a strength, the ability to consistently provide near perfect performance. So they were asked the question, why do you call it strength finders and not talent finders? And they said, there's a really good answer to that, but I'm not going to give it to you. I'll make you read the book. But I am going to tell you, page 21, he says, even though we recognize that everyone is different, all too often we give only surface attention to this critical insight. It's relatively easy to describe our acquired expertise, but most of us struggle when asked to describe our natural talents. If you find it difficult to name all of your talents, take a step back and you'll see that often have something in common, a theme that connects them. Some talents, like natural tendencies to share thoughts, to create engaging stories, to find the perfect word, are directly connected to communication. That's what they have in common, their theme. So to begin thinking and talking about them, we call them communication talents. Other talents, such as natural dependability, a sense of commitment, and an avoidance of excuses, have responsibility as a theme. So we have identified them as responsibility talents. This theme language gives us a starting place for discovering our talents and learning even more about our potential for strength. All right, so the main thing I want you to think about today is, how often have you been lumped into a category? Whether it's basic training or it's, I got an engineering degree, or I have a mathematics degree, or I am a CPA. And all of a sudden people think they know everything there is to know about you because you have that label. You fall into that category. Maybe it's your voting block. Maybe it's your racial identity. Maybe it's your religious identity. Maybe it's your demographic, the part of the world you grew up in, the city you grew up in. I mean, there's a guy right now by the name of J.D. Vance that grew up in the Appalachian Mountains. He grew up in poverty. He grew up being raised by his grandmother. And the achievements he's made so far, what he's accomplished in life so far, have been exactly what they're talking about. If you just take the talents that you have and you apply effort to them, you invest in raising those talents as high as you can, then those talents become a strength. If you have a natural talent and you never focus on it, it doesn't become a strength. You might have a skill set that you've been trained to do, but if that skill set is counter to your talents, if it's not the natural thing in you. I know a young lady, she's no longer with us, but when she went through school, she decided, I want to be a nurse. And she went to nursing school, finished all of her school, and got all the way through her practicals. And the first day on the job, they sent her into the room with an older man and asked him to change the bedpan, asked her to change his bedpan. And she said the experience was so horrific. She walked out of the hospital that day and realized I wasted all my time and money on nursing school because I am not cut out for that. It takes a special kind of person to have a level of tolerance and a barrier of disgust to be able to say, I'm gonna take care of human bodies in that way. Probably something that should have been discovered while in nursing school. But the truth was, she and her family both felt like, hey, if you get money from being a nurse, the more you get nursing education, the more money you get from nursing, and it's a good career, and there's good money in it. And I can tell you many of people who have left the medical field, not retired, and not been forced out, but they've chosen to move on to something else. For whatever reason they went into medicine, they realized not too long in, that is not what I thought it is. And so now you have this skill set you've been trained to, but it doesn't necessarily fit your nature. It's not exactly what you were made for. The sooner you can discover that, the better off your life will be. The sooner you can discover that, the more power to gain wealth you will have. Because I promise you, if every commodity that if you walk into the grocery store and you look and every box of cereal is exactly the same size and exactly the same price with exactly the same ingredients, it's going to be really hard to choose between them. But if you walked in and there's a different flavor, there's a different size, there's a different price, now all of a sudden you're basing your decisions based on all of those differences, all of those uniquenesses. If you go in to buy a box of cereal, and they're all the same size, they're different flavors, and they're different prices, as a commodity, you're now shopping on price. And I'll tell you something, even as a human being, I don't care what skill you bring to the world, what thing you produce, what service you offer, whether as a leader or as a team member, the minute you become a commodity, homogenized, just the same as everybody else, your value goes down because now everybody shops on price. But the more unique you are, and the more you can identify your own uniquenesses, the more powerful your offering and your value in the marketplace. The more people look at you and go, nobody does that the way you do. My very first coaching client, when she insisted on hiring me, I told her, I don't do coaching. She said, no, I want you to do this. And I pointed at her 4 or 5 other people who were also certified leadership coaches. And she said, but how many of them can tell my story better than I can? And I laughed. I said, I don't know that anybody else tries. I find it fun. She said, yeah, but you're actually really, really good at it. And that uniqueness has made a way for me where nothing else has. And every time I try to level the playing field and bring myself down and be like everybody else, where I'm only offering the services that everybody else offers, I don't find the kind of success in it, the uniqueness, the one thing that I do that nobody else can do, that's what's made a way for me. And I believe that's true in your life. And whether we're talking about cloning sheep or transhuman creations with chips in the back of their brain, the more we try to make everyone just alike, I believe the more we fail as a society, the more we destroy our own future and our own culture, the more we can recognize our uniquenesses, even if they're only a few degrees off. The more powerful we'll be as leaders. And as leaders, when you can recognize those uniquenesses, not only in yourself, but in everybody on your team, where you can help people to raise up their level of skill in a given area of talent, then they can find their strength and really operate in that. And if you're not using Strength Finders, go get it. You can take the test and then read the book. I don't recommend you read the book first. It may mess with the way you try to take the test, because everybody thinks they know what they're good at, and they're usually wrong. Take the test, then read through it, and here's what you'll probably find. What I found when I took the Strength Finders test was a whole lot of explanation for previous relationships, previous experiences, previous encounters that I could never put my mind around. I just couldn't understand why that kept happening. And then I took the Strength Finders test, and I went, oh, well, that makes sense. When you squeeze the tube of toothpaste, the toothpaste comes out. That's what it's supposed to do. That was my natural gift. I didn't know it. Now I do. If you'll do that for yourself and you'll do that for your team, you'll find this power to gain wealth that seems way off the charts compared to where you have been. Don't allow yourself to be homogenized into a commodity. Don't allow your team to do that either. And you'll find yourself a more powerful, more influential leader for everybody around you. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.